Welcome to All Nature Connected, a podcast created by the Forest Bathing Institute, where we explore all nature connected topics, including nature and health, nature inspired lifestyle, nature connection and forest bathing, nature preservation, and eco awareness. We hope that this podcast will inspire you to become more connected with nature and your own health and well-being. Hello everyone, this is Olga today with Nigel Grimes, and we will be talking about the wonderful book that Nigel has recently debuted here in the UK. The book is called The Forest Secret, Helping Children to Discover the Magic of Nature, and this is a wonderful book I'm holding in my hands now, but you can also see it on Nigel's Zoom icon if you are looking at the picture of us. But I would like to just introduce Nigel to start with, and then Nigel can tell us more about his wonderful book. So Nigel Grimes is a well-being practitioner, certified forest bathing guide, breathing coach, ICF life coach, and children's author. After recovering from stress-related illness through breathwork and mindfulness in nature, he founded Nigel Grimes Wellbeing and Connect with the Forest, offering mindful nature experiences, forest bathing, and well-being coaching for individuals, corporates, and private groups. Charities and schools as well across Southwest London, Surrey, and beyond. His debut children books, The Forest Secret, Helping Children Discover the Magic of Nature, invites families and educators to slow down, explore the outdoors, and reconnect children with the natural world. So this is a beautiful book that I'm so happy to be discovering with you all today. So Nigel, could you tell us a bit more about the book? So who it is for? I know I've read a little bit about educators and caretakers, but what is the story in the book? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you, Olga, for letting me share this. Um, yeah, the book has, as you touched on, has different target audiences, if you like. It's certainly got young children in mind, and it's got a storybook within the book itself. And the story is really about a young girl who's kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed. There's lots of noise in the house. iPads, phones, digital stuff going on in the house, and her, and she's a busy school. Perhaps she's slightly sensitive. Um, Child, there's lots going on. School's busy, everywhere's busy, and her gran pops into her bedroom and sees she's a little bit busy. So, Gran, wise old Gran, because the older generation uh, have their value and their wisdom that perhaps in some cultures today isn't actually as valued as it should be. And that's one of the things I wanted to get across was the intergenerational relationship, which I was one of the points as I was writing it, I was thinking I need to make more of this. So Gran takes Amelia, who's the name of the little girl and thing, and he takes her into the forest, and immediately they hit the forest. They kind of feel a sense of calmness and initial connection. And then it's very much like forest bathing for adults turned into children, just slightly simplified. So they use their senses um, to connect with nature and experience. They also are obviously very mindful. So they mindfully watch and hear and smell and not so much taste in this. There's some stuff in the exercise, but taste is one of those things that's we have to be very careful with, unless we're a qualified forager, which lots of listeners to this will be. And So it's a story, and it brings out, I guess, really brings out the benefits of that we know about forest bathing, about the calmness and the physical and the mental aspects of it. as well as I'm hoping as a result of the book, and part of the book is that the point that if we get children engaged early, that they'll hopefully get into habits of connecting with nature, but also over in time um, appreciate nature and see its value, and then as they go forward, um, care about nature and perhaps be evangelists for nature, if you like, going forward. Because there's lots of us adults who love nature, but I want to get to root cause because the book you've written, and there's some really great books out there. I'd say they're mainly aimed at kind of adults, and they're kind of science based, and they come across as all the medical parents. We're absolutely fantastic. I wanted this to talk to find a way to connect to the children, if you like. So that's one aspect of the book. So there's the storybook, and at the end, the Forest secret, without giving the secret away, you don't need to read the book, is that you take the peace and the calm home with you, and that's the thing. And actually, it's not one of those secrets you keep. It's a secret you discover, and then you tell all your friends, your child, your friends at school, and then you tell the mums and the dads and the teachers and other people. So it kind of ends like that. The other thing, I could have just done the storybook, which I think's kind of cute in its own way, but I felt that under the stresses today, that parents and teachers and some of the generations one or two just behind me have lost that connection with nature too. So, and I do hear conversations sometimes where coming up to a half-term holiday, I do hear conversations on the buses and stuff where a parent will on a phone, she'll say, "Oh God, the kids are off next week. What the hell am I going to do with them all week?" And things like that. And then you think, oh, and then you hear a conversation, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm going to the gym, I'm doing this and that, and yeah, and I've got the kids' party. And it's like, well, where's that time for children? And actually there are things you can do, and there's simple things. And actually then, a lot of nature's free. So I wanted to get that across as well. And within that, so there's obviously explains what forest bathing is, talks about the benefits of it. Um, And it also has got some of the research that I know the Institute have been behind themselves. There's lots of research across the world as reference points to help teachers, particularly, build and bid for more space with their board of governors, etc., to allow more time for kids to just naturally play, discover, create, and learn in an outdoor environment. So there's lots of case studies, research references around well-being, school performance, attendance increase, their mental and physical behaviors, their emotional resilience, which is going to be useful to parents and teachers to get that. And then, of course, there's games in there. So there's tips. As I said, some people don't know how to, even parents sometimes don't know how to engage with children. Sounds silly, but I think some of that art's been lost a little bit. So there's tips in there about some of the games. And again, some of the games are based on some of the adult stuff that we would do out there, smelling games, finding different tastes, different sounds, identifying where they're coming from. And there's a tree community game we all love. And there's things that particularly I like where I talk about looking from the heart at something rather than from the eyes, and how and it kind of highlights the fact that we've got three brains, one in our head, our heart, and our gut. And you can use all three to describe how you feel and your emotions and stuff. Well, I think it's important to kids because they can't always articulate from their head, particularly kids with busy heads or maybe neurodiverse kids. So yeah, so it's got different bits. So how it's yes, I'm kind of hoping it's going to be useful to lots of people and people can pick out the bits they want. So it's a bit long-winded, but that describes the whole book almost, if you like.
That's brilliant. There is so much in a book that's very accessible. You can read it probably overnight, I think, with some older kids especially. But this is something that I feel especially as a working with people, connecting, helping connect them to nature, and the researchers, I feel not just in the UK but worldwide, there is such a missing place in the market, you can say, also in the educational system, about bringing that education, bringing that awareness back to the basic level at like elementary, primary schools for children to be able to understand what kind of world they live in, what are the ways they can connect with nature for their own health and well-being. In a way, I'm very excited that you wrote a book in this way, that it's not just for educators or the parents or just the children. It's for both, because we need to work on it together to help kids connect with nature. But also, as you said, later, once at the end of the story, is that the girl takes this connection and shares it, because there is a lot of empowerment, I think, that we can bring to children through making them feel confident in nature, making them feel like what they're doing, exploring nature, it's all fine, and it's all process of exploration and building up confidence and building up resilience as well, especially if you go in different weather conditions, and also a process of bonding. Because I think, as you were saying, that this digital era, I think one of the biggest challenges that we find ourselves in is that new generation of kids who are growing up with not physical friends, but rather the friends online. So the phone becomes our kind of number one friend, and physically, many of the young people I've spoken to, they feel quite disconnected to themselves and the world around. And of course, the studies also show that if the study, for instance, with the University of Derby, there was a collaboration with National Trust and University of Derby, showed that if we're not connecting with nature in early stages of our life, they say up to 11 and a half years, we're unlikely to be able to connect later on in life. And many people who connect early, then even if they lose that connection for, I don't know, maybe they are doing lots of work or have busy commitments, and they just lose track of that incredible resource that they were aware of growing up, they still come back to it often when they are older, maybe in their early 30s, when they start families, etc., because it's just something that keeps you anchored. And so it's so important, and I'm fascinated that such a book now exists, and there are so many practical things that educators can pick from there. And I hope that it will spread to libraries across different schools in our country, and hopefully even beyond. But I'm also curious, as a researcher, as a forest bathing fellow forest bathing guide, what was your personal inspiration for writing this book? Why was it that you chose this specific topic? I know that you have lots of areas of expertise, and you have your own journey, a very interesting journey that you're coming from. But why this book? Why kids?
Um, I guess for me, I love kids. I just, I love children. I was brought up, my mum was one of 10, my dad was one of 8, and I was like one of 16 cousins, and I saw them all the time. And I babysat from about 11, 12 years of age. Um, but I guess really what brought it home was, observing, seeing the kids on their phones a lot, and hearing these conversations with the parents on the buses and what have you over the years. Increasingly, as you say, that gap, that disconnection happening between um, digital to digital rather than human to human. Um, but from a personal level, I know how much just walking our dogs, taking the girls out for walks, and as they were learning to cycle, um, particularly the girls with, my girls are adopted, so early life trauma, and they got some neurodiverse and challenges, particularly one daughter has anyway. And nature really did help calm them. And even today, my daughter's got some kind of, the older one's got some, some extra additional needs. And if we can persuade her to go into nature, she becomes a different person, not only in nature, but when she's back again. And it really has helped. So I can see that as well as seeing the work I do with adults. Because actually, adults, when we take them out, they become children in a way. You know what I mean? They're kind of listening to you, your little bit of guidance, and then they're off doing their own thing, and they're not in their busy adult mind again. So I think that kind of magic of bringing children across, and as I say earlier, I think I had the idea about 2.5 years ago, wrote an outline of a book, discussed it with a forest bathing friend who thought it was a good idea. Um, And then actually, I put it away because I was thinking, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to work, I've got to work. And then earlier in the year, I was a kind of not a low, but slightly work was down. I was thinking, oh, what can I do? I know your heart's really telling you to go and look at that book again and write the actual story rather than the outline. And I guess that's come. And actually, over the years of the forest bathing, probably comes right now because I've observed the forest bathing mainly with adults, but the odd session with kids and the breathing and taking children into the woods, plus my own personal family stuff that still works for us today, as I explained. And I think that's where it came from. And I did think there was a gap in the market. There's lots of great books out there, as we know. Um, some of them you and Gary have produced, but and I did a bit of research, and I couldn't really find another book like this. Um, Although, funny enough, I was researching a couple of days ago again, well, I did find something kind of similar, but I haven't ordered the book or anything, but it's kind of got the same thing. Because there's lots of stories about going into the forest, but they're magical ones and fantasy ones, which are great. And, books are important because we said, when you're gaming or you're on playing these games on your phone or your iPad, you don't use your imagination very much. Everything's preset and it's algorithms and it takes you from this story to this character. This happens, that happens. You don't make it up yourself. So that imagination's gone. Whereas getting out into to nature, we played games all the time outside and we were pretending we were, I was of the age where there was cowboys and Indians and good British soldiers and not such nice German soldiers, all sorts of stuff, which, when you're a kid, it goes over your head anyway, and actually didn't impact any of my views because I had German aunties and all sorts and quite a mix. But you just play, and you can play a goodie, you can play a baddie, and that imagination. Whereas now, it seems to me that you're allocated, and that's the route you're on in the gaming. I don't just game at all, but the little bits I talk to my nephews about. So I think that's some of the just some of that. I think getting that connection was important back to me, drawing on my experience and some of my instinct, if you like.
That's amazing. It's like the journey that you connected on a personal level as a parent, and as well as you saw around you, and also that connection to nature that you experienced that helped you and helped your kids. And I just wanted to say, I skipped through the book, and what really drew me in, and I think all kids would love, is the illustrations. I don't know whether you will be, as listeners, able to then check out the video, but this book is such a beautiful artwork, and there are so many different things and little pictures that you can come back to. And I think for kids it is important. I know that the more beautiful, the more colorful. It's not even about, too much of something extravagant. It's just about the colors and the simplicity of understanding or the meaning behind the pictures, which I think this book provides so well. And if we know that kids nowadays may be very much keen on visual elements, I can see that the colors and the certain ways that information is presented on today's market for kids is much more less subtle, I would say, than when I was growing up. For instance, it's brighter colors and brighter images. So I think for kids, even those who might prefer playing a game to reading a book, this book could be still very interesting because it has such bright, beautiful colors and images. So it's kind of bringing them back to reading through this book can be a very, very good thing, and
Yeah,
helpful for parents. But I
thank you. Yeah,
also,
because the illustrators, that was by chance really that I discovered the illustrators. So the timing worked perfectly because I do workshops with one of the illustrators' mums. She's a Czech lady, and she does a lot of she does a lot of plant-based cooking and nutrition. And I did a couple of community workshops in Sutton with her, where I she did some of the made the food and talked about making food, fermenting and stuff, and I did forest bathing in their garden centre, and I did a breath workshop around their little pond. Um, and her daughter just came along to support her and help her one day. And I was chatting to her daughter. She seemed very nice. You know, she just left uni, was starting to do some work. And then when I actually wrote the book a few weeks later, when I inspired, I gave her a call and said, you know, do you fancy your first real go? Because she was a graphic designer, so her and her friend. I just gave them the words of the book, gave them an idea of what I want. So it was actually a verbal brief. They came back, we're good, and then it's astonishing illustrations come back front cover, and it's really beautiful. Amelia and Estelle have done an amazing job. Bear in mind they never done illustrations for a book before. So they're 22 years old. So it was amazing.
this is actually incredible. I didn't know that. And to me, it's beautiful as well because 22-year-olds still young adults, right? And this connection back to
Mm.
being children, but they've done an amazing job. And this is something that I think is very catching your eye when you look at the book. And hopefully, like if, for instance, I'm a parent and I'm seeing this in a library, this is something that definitely is going to draw my attention in. And I
Oh,
hope the
good.
children, because I'm seeing through an eye of a parent and a caregiver, and children often, that's how I see what I know children would like this this book, because that's how yeah, I picked on the colors, and I think that that would really help them. But one thing I wanted to ask you, in terms of just, I think, an interesting thing to explore is, where do you hope the ideas in this book going, or maybe the intentions of this book going? Because I wanted you, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit more about why nature. So there are lots of things now emerging, even in gaming. I've been to a conference a few weeks ago, and there is a lot of things about well-being and gaming, because they started to understand that if people are going to be doing gaming, and gaming has been now seen as top one hobby that people have. I mean, to me, it's scary, but this is the world we live in. And how do we then introduce health and well-being into the gaming? So there are other things like virtual reality apps, or types of interventions that I know lots of different schools try, as well as educational systems. But yeah, I know you and me, we are very keen on nature, right? That's why we are where we are. But what do you think is it in nature that is so important for our kids' health and well-being? And where do you think it can take us? It can lead us. What could be the possibilities or future things to look forward to if we live in a more nature-connected world,
Yeah.
so to say?
Yeah, I think it's two sides there. I think, well, nature we kind of know does gets you into a real world versus virtual, and that's an important thing, particularly when people are young. That, you know, we know the brain never stops developing, has a huge increase till you're 25, but then you know things come and go, and my brain's still developing part of. There's more dying than growing, probably, sadly now, but it's the curiosity's still there. So I think that's very very important that people realize that, you know, because the virtual world can be a bit scary, and a lot of kids and I've seen this with my own kids, and it multiplied almost if you got some want to, reality versus imagination or making up things is really quite hard for kids, particularly kids. One of my daughters, for example, knowing what's real and what's not, and even in their own moments, not realizing that I know something because I know something. So, that little kid who's in a room spills something, and then mummy or daddy come and said, "Oh, what happened?" You say, "What do you mean?" And they say, "I didn't do it." And with the virtual reality games, it's almost that connection, cause and effect of killing someone, doing mean things in games, that kind of being is not being countered by reality in a way. So I think nature helps that counterbalance. Nature certainly is going to slow the mind down because that need for fast reactions, brain and physical, there's a balance on the scales, and nature gives that. So if you're always here, fast, 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 and I know from a breathing perspective that people, when they become that, they hold their breath or they start, their anxiety or their excitement just comes and hyperventilating, which is bad for the health. Whereas when you go out into nature, you slow down. Again, you're countering it, and you're making sure your neural networks and your breathing receptors are able and aware of both sides of the story, if you like, of breathing and managing your autonomic nervous system. So I think that's important. I touching on your point over about gaming and wellness. Sometimes you can't beat it, so you have to integrate with it. So you have to piggyback it. So maybe we get people like you and I get more into bed with young children's games, and we identify some of the slow parts of the day that children need to counter the next, and actually put some of the games based around getting out in nature and earning points for hearing bird sounds, or for, I don't know, rather than earning points for whatever games do, because I don't really, as I say, I'm not really in touch with them, and we kept our girls away from them as much as we could, really. So it's integrating and being creative, I guess, and not being in conflict, accepting it's there, and then working together. I think is a great way. Interestingly, as I was writing the books, I was coming as this book, kind of thought about the woods in the stories when I was a kid. Well, actually, they're pretty negative stories, actually. So I thought of Hansel and Gretel. You're going into the woods, and then some old woman invites you into a sweetie house, and then there was Red Riding Hood. I mean, my gosh, you go into the woods, and there's a wolf dressed. Your grand turns into a wolf, and then the hero's a 6'6" man carrying an axe. Now, I'm as a 6, 7 year old, I'm not going to go up to a man carrying an axe saying, "Oh, can you help me?" So there's all this stuff, and then there's Bambi or Disney films. Someone's orphaned in the first 10 seconds of every Disney film, anyway. Every film that's been made is about orphan. And when you've got adopted kids, that's not always a good thing for them to see in the first 20 seconds. And even as you grow up, Blair Witch Project, Sleepy Hollow, actually magic and lovely stuff happens in the woods. So I kind of felt, in a way, that the book countered those as well. And there's more happiness in the woods than fear, because those books would not encourage me to go into the woods. Although, of course, I did, because where I lived and the parks and stuff. But it's kind of funny when I felt about it from that perspective, how negative some of these books are.
Oh yeah, I absolutely can relate to that. Growing up in a Slavic world, all our fairy tales is about something that will come and get you. But interestingly, in our case as kids, that encouraged us to go in the woods because it was something exciting. We were looking for all this, like, Baba Yaga, all this like witches, and yeah, poking our noses where we shouldn't have gone. But it's interesting that I feel exactly that. So for some kids, it's then becomes a forest a magical place, but it's scary place. And I think, yeah, changing it with something as bright, as beautiful as what you've depicted here, it's such a change to our mindset. And I think also because, well, we don't have too many. I mean, obviously, kids will never go into the woods on their own, but in the past, there were wolves and bears and big predators. So I think that was kind of for safety reasons. So to deter kids from going into the woods on their own, which I know I did with my friends as a kid. So defer them from doing that because it's not safe. And actually, yeah. But now we want the caregivers and the parents to go to the forests with kids and for kids to be able to safely explore it. So that's wonderful. And I would really love to see, as I said, this book in different bookshops, in different libraries across the UK and beyond. So can you tell us a little bit more about where can we get the actual copies, maybe physical or getting them online as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been working hard the last few weeks to try and get it to shops, and I've got some local independent bookshops to stock it. So online, there is obviously Amazon. You can't, whether you love or hate Amazon, your book goes on Amazon. That's your biggest channel. Um, it's on Waterstones. Um, you can get it in the shops, and I mean, I don't think there's many stocking at the moment. I'm working on local shops, and I'm trying to get them to stock it. I'm offering to do readings to children and book signings if there's demand, obviously. Um, I've been into my local schools, my school I went to when I was a kid, so which is 150 years old now, and other schools I've worked with the teachers, parents, and the children. So I've been into some of those schools, and I've got some more lined up in the new year. Other stores, Blackwell's, which got bought by Waterstones last year, I believe. It was an independent family company. There's lots of these children's book sites who kind of resell. They buy books and resell. So there's some of them. What other ones? So in the States, it's sold a couple on Barnes and Noble, for example. Sold one to Germany. I assume that's via Amazon. I don't know. I got these books out. I think, oh, who do I know in Germany? I don't think I do at the moment. Anyway, and yeah, so mainly resellers. I'm working on trying to get it into some other retailers and places of interest where they sell books and there's nature. So, you know, independent garden centres, things like that. So, yeah, it's quite hard work to get it in this time of year because it's quite busy. Um, Christmas gifts, but hopefully this book is around for years. To be honest with you, so it doesn't matter when it sells. At some point, I may get my money back because you have to invest the money to obviously produce a book. Um, uh, yeah, so it's available. It's hardback and paperback. It's 48 pages, so it's a meaty book. And but as I say, as we discussed earlier, I wanted it to not give half the story. I wanted to enable it to become alive, really, not just stay in a story. So yeah, so it's
That's
cool. Yeah, and if there's important information, obviously there's my website. There's a little bit more about the book on there, and there's some embedded radio interviews I've done a few radio interviews and a number of podcasts, including this, which is nice because you can talk about your passion for the book, and it's great. Get the word out there, and I think it'll help all of us as forest bathers as well. I really do think because I think um, there's big demand on unmet demand from children. So I'm kind of hoping across the UK, across the world, really, that this book might open up some opportunities for people, forest bathing guys on a local level to go and work with children. Because I know it's something that lots of us are passionate about. as you forgive the pun, but you get to the root cause of the problem, you're taking away the disconnection for the future generations. So so you're building for the future.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's such an important work connecting adults, children, nature. It should all be part of something we do as a community, I feel. And in a sense, it's intergenerational, and we can do it, as I love how you put a grandma here and a granddaughter. It doesn't just need to be for certain groups of people at a certain location. If you have a forest, if you have a park, it's absolutely fine. And I think one thing that I really loved and I would like to finish this interview with is that you don't just talk about nature. As you said, there are lots of books. Well, there are not lots of books, but still books out there about the magic of nature. You talk about some practical things to connect with nature. And I love the research by Dr. Professor Miles Richardson from the University of Derby. And I do recommend his book, Reconnection, if you want to find out more. But he did a lot of research into the nature connectedness. It's that aspect of us feeling that we are part of nature or one with nature. And he was researching it because he found that out of different factors that influencing our health and well-being, but also pro-environmental attitudes, such as how much we care about the planet and what we actually do to help the planet. Out of many factors he looked at, including proximity to nature, time spent in nature, regularity of nature visits, as well as social economical positions of people he researched, it was nature connectedness that was the one single most important factor that determined not only how well off we are physically and emotionally, despite other circumstances such as social, political, economical position, but also how much we would care about nature. And what he found out, it's not just about time in nature, it's the quality of our time in nature, what we do. So, for instance, even if you don't live anywhere near ancient woodland, which is absolutely fine, you live in the middle of a busy city, but when you're walking to school, for instance, as a kid, you take time to observe changes in nature around you. You take time to maybe touch the bark on a tree and notice that. And that is likely to give you more health and well-being benefits and make you feel more connected to nature throughout your day, even if you stay in a school where you wouldn't have too many natural elements, than if you were to walk for hours in a wood without noticing anything, just as a nature being a backdrop. So I think this book is really talking about that important aspect of nature connection and nature and well-being. It's not just about going to nature, it's about what you do in nature. So yeah, I'm very grateful for you sharing this book with us today, Nigel. And of course, I will put all the links about where you can get this book from on different retailers and also Nigel's website if you would like to ask any questions. So thank you very much, Nigel, today for this wonderful interview. And I hope we can talk at some point soon again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Lovely to see you again. And I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.